We're backstage at the Radio Festival where Dee Ford, the Group Managing Director of Bauer Radio, has just been on stage talking to Torin Douglas. How did the session go for you? It was a bit of kind of meet the bosses session, so talking about your life in radio and a bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah, I couldn't believe how quickly that session went actually, and I think we touched on some really important stuff. Well, the point I was trying to make in my conversation with Torin is that actually what you do with your radio assets today is really predetermined by where the radio assets came from in the first place. So when you think about the history of commercial radio, these were sort of big radio stations stamped out in the major cities, Clyde in Glasgow, Radio City in Liverpool, Key 103 in Manchester, etc. And then you started to get the infill, and then you get those regionals coming in over the top. And then, of course, we've had consolidation. So you start to carve up the assets, and there is a real sweet spot because no matter whose research you look at, you know, whether it's Bauer's or the BBC's or any radio group's research, you can see that audiences really, really appreciate local content. They really want to listen and give you their unfair share of their week. That's all well and good, but actually, if you have subscale radio licenses, so in those small markets, it's really difficult to make the economics work. So actually, what the sweet spot is having fantastic heritage radio stations with enough scale to make the economics work. Now, for Bauer, that does work. For Global, they've got a spread of assets across a number of different size markets. So you go down the route, instead of pure local, as I would say, you go down the route of co-location, sharing content, taking the cost down, rebranding to create that commercial demand where there was none before. And perhaps if you're UKRD, then you think about running those stations on a shoestring. None of these strategies are wrong. I think your strategy going forward is largely determined by where you've come from.
You talked about how audiences are thriving. One of the things that Richard Park told me when I spoke to him in an interview a couple of weeks ago was how, for him, the place he's working at the moment is the best place he's ever worked because it's in private hands, and that enables us to do things a little bit differently than when you're responsible to shareholders. How has working for Bauer and being a part of a big private company made a difference to what you do?
I think, you know, gone are the days when you're dancing to quarterly meetings with the shareholders. That in itself is fantastically freeing. But the relationship that I think we've got with our owners is one where there is significant authority and responsibility pushed down to the teams. So we all think really hard and long before we do something. Or if we're really committed to something, we can run at it and we know we've got authority to do it. So it means that the whole organisation, I think, becomes much more agile. There's very little referring up. And actually, when we have to refer up for big decisions, so we're just going through a multiplex relicensing process now, for example, very big investments. So when we do refer up to a conversation with the Bauers, things get dealt with really quickly. And as long as you've got a smart argument for it, then it's a great position to be in.
And you just said the first time you met Mr. Bauer, he was flying a plane, so
yes.
You got a lot of trust in him, I guess.
Yeah. Actually, perhaps that's the trust test. Yeah. And of course, we've been around every one of our radio stations at least once now. So we've done quite a bit of, well, I say he's done a lot of flying time. Yeah, I don't think, rather like Richard saying, private is good, for me, the environment in the Bauer ownership is incredibly good. And I think for the people who work within Bauer, it's always nice to know as well, at the back of your mind, that this is an owner who's 5th generation now and actually has never sold an asset. You know, he keeps things to nurture things and grow things, not to sell them, which is really different.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, obviously, looking at where your group has come from. In terms of where we're going next, Ashley Tabor did a similar session to you this morning, and he didn't rule out further consolidation within the industry. Do you think there's more changing hands of stations and groups to come?
I think there's inevitably got to be, because there are subscale players out there. So they themselves must be thinking now about what their future is. It's a poor market to sell assets at the moment, and actually I guess both Global and ourselves would have issues around some of our competitors being owned by us because of local competition issues, you know, share of local revenues. So I agree with Ashley. I think there is more to come. I'm not quite sure what shape that is going to be in. I'm not quite sure what the timing's like with regard to selling. I wouldn't like to be selling an asset now. And I also agree there are other things to be doing. So it's not, our life no longer is just about radio. It's about other stuff too.
Okay, thanks, Dee. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the rest of the festival.